Hello. Good morning. Okay, so yeah, last time got a little bit cut off. So yeah, go figure. Some friggin' random bird just like flies out of nowhere, hits my daughter's window while she's taking a nap. It was absolutely ballistic for over an hour. It's oof. A little bit nuts. Anyway, so back on track here. Well, Aerosol's actually doing surprisingly fine. Let's have you go over here. You probably go over here. But yeah, so like I was saying last time, was thinking recently as far as stress levels in different games go, like specifically strategy games and all that, because it's interesting how some of them intentionally implement that as almost a feature of sorts, while others, seem to go out of their way to avoid it. Like this, I would honestly call as like a bizarre happy medium. Like it has a lot of the, you kind of need to keep formations going, and you got to keep certain units going, or else you can run into problems and stuff generally de-escalate or generally falling apart super quick. So yeah, I have all of that of like the more stressful ones, but you have a lot of the quality of life stuff. A lot of the, I guess, lack of uneasiness, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, it's like this kind of thing, whenever going through the runs of this, it's almost like a trance-like thing, you just eventually set up a party and you just kind of have this rhythm going in your head, and you're generally confident that, aside from certain situations, you aren't really going to get jarred out of your strategy, because you probably aren't going to be losing your units all that often. And so I was thinking about that recently, because essentially I've been going back to back. I mentioned several times, but essentially for my work, it generally involves a lot of calling and answering emails and that sort of thing. So I, will occasionally just, play games in the background while I'm waiting for somebody to respond or something like that. So, for example, like with Xenonauts there, or the original XCOM or whatever. So they put in things like sight lines. So like if you don't have your guy looking the exact correct direction, you might have your entire group ambushed by somebody you didn't even see. Like especially at night, they give you flares to light up things and stuff, but you just basically have lose 5 people out of the darkness as just nothing that you can actually see ends up happening. That kind of stuff. And you have, say, 8 people on a door ready to go into a door, and then the moment you open it, you're suddenly down to 3. This is everything inside just took a reaction shot kind of thing. And it's weird because it's rewarding but stressful. And then they remade it, or not really Xenonauts there, but they remade the original XCOM there, in kind of like a mind to make it a little bit more like this in many ways, in which it was given kind of more of a relaxed feel. Like it was still extraordinarily difficult, and you could still run into line-of-sight stuff, but everyone could see around themselves a lot better. In general, all your units were a lot more identified as they were. Like in, original XCOM and its clones and everything, they always had the same thing going on, where all of them were just basically a pile of stats on a dude. And then, like for example, in Xenonauts there, they gave the option of classing people away based off of different loadouts that you can set up for them, but by and large, they were just a dude with stats. They didn't really have classes or anything, and it's weird how much less stressful a class system made it. Like, the remake I'm talking about in particular, so it's Enemy Unknown, also known as Enemy Within, basically just remade it, and they added a class system to it, which isn't really so much like this. It's more like you get a guy, they start off as just a rookie, and then essentially after they end up, proving themselves one way or another, I think it's like if they go on 2 missions or if they get a kill during one of them, they end up getting promoted up to a class. So they have a few different ones that are round. So like that first one, you get like snipers that aren't able to move but can shoot real far, or essentially a shotgun guy or a rocket guy, or a support guy, which is just like your medicine guy more or less. And like your medicine and distractions and stuff like that kind of guy. And then each skill, like, they basically just got an option of different skills going down it. So each time they got promoted, they got to pick between one of those things, and essentially it was just like erasing one of their limitations, more or less. So it was less. Okay, it was kind of like a mix between erasing what limitations were there and essentially giving new abilities and whatnot. Like, say for example, you have your support guy. So, you know, they end up having options of like just being better at healing folks, essentially by having all their smoke stuff work better, by essentially being able to shoot when something else is shooting, and just like all these very clear, like, X happens in X situation and you know exactly what you're getting into, so it winds up being less chaotic despite being extraordinarily chaotic. It's interesting. So, I ended up doing that way, and it became a lot less stressful. Like, it's funny, because you end up losing just as often. I mean, those games are basically known for, like, oh, you know, outnumbering everybody 5-1, this should be perfectly fine, and then everybody gets crushed because one of your newbie people panics and ends up attacking your own side, and stuff like that. It's, like, you end up losing just as often for just as stupid reasons. But at the same time, you know, just the fact that it's all more organized somehow makes it less stressful, like the fact that you can see what's going on. And, you know, then they made a sequel to it, and then it just got crazy nuts, because then pretty much all your units just became frickin' superheroes at that point. So they're like, okay, you know, this guy just got really good at pistols all of a sudden, now they can shoot everything on the map once, and that kind of stuff. But yeah, so then this one kind of took the approach, you know, you can see everything, but you can't necessarily do anything about it. But then probably the happiest and like least stressful strategy thing I've ever seen doesn't even really have a lose condition most of the time, which was FFTA 2. And it's just weird how they did it, because there's technically no lose condition or anything. You just can go and immediately redo whatever it was, you know, maybe minus whatever resources you had to pay to go into the thing. But it was just interesting because it, yeah, you you didn't necessarily need a lose condition to have a really good strategy game in that one. Really not sure what else to elaborate on that there, because yeah. Like, this one is very close to being like that, too, and, I like the line here, you know? Like, especially with One Vision now. I like the line between it's legitimately challenging and there's a legitimate lose condition, but you can still pull it back without requiring some ridiculous luck. It's like, hell, look at how many of the fights in just these runs alone ended up being just whittled down to the last 3 or 4 guys, and still was able to pull it out in the end. And, you know, I always like to see that. Sorry, I need to grab some water here. But I always like to see when that happens. Because it's, like I was saying, just a really fine line there. Actually, probably the worst example I've ever seen on it. There was a remake a few years ago. I want to say it's almost been a decade now. God, it's weird how old some stuff is that feels like it just came out. But Jagged Alliance got a remake. And apparently the people remaking it just had no idea or concept whatsoever of what made the original interesting. So if you've never tried that series out, in a nutshell, it's just you essentially have an island, and you're supposed to take over that island with just a group of mercenaries. So you just basically have this website that you go to, and it's like, oh, just mercenaries are us. Like, you have your budget, you budget out people, you budget out their equipment, and then essentially you send out little groups to different parts of the island, you know, go fight stuff here or there, and, you know, train up little groups here or there, or just hold this area over here while this other group does this other thing. And yeah, it's very difficult, but very fun, and actually surprisingly funny. But then they remade it. And, like, one of the big things about it was that you never knew what was going on. You know, you never knew how many things were in different buildings, you never knew just how big of a group you were fighting against, and then they make this remake, and their first thing is like, for some reason, we are going to make everything visible. And the weird part is, unlike how it was utilized here, it didn't actually make anything less stressful. If anything, it actually made it weirdly annoying. Because the entire time, you could basically see that the AI was derping around and not really doing anything terribly amazing. But yeah, you were still losing anyway, because your own people couldn't friggin' hit their own toe. And what I mean by that is, like, literally, the best example I can think of, that was one of the early times I was trying to do a run of that one. And I have 4 guys, right? And they're in this little house, and there's just this random dude sitting right in the open. So I have these 4 lie down. You know, they're just lying there with rifles and everything, and they're aiming at this guy, and it takes them forever to aim and stuff. And yeah, believe it or not, they actually have a stat based on how well they even bother listening to you, which starts off super low. So you're just waiting for like 15 seconds while they aim at a thing. And they all repeatedly miss. This guy turns around, like, whips out a pistol at ludicrously far away, and then just, like, picks them off one by one with no problem. And this was on one of the easier difficulties, because I kept toning it down to see if it was, you know, some... I don't know, some weird difficulty thing that kept happening. It was like, no, they just made it really bizarre. Oh, by the way, so this is a story drop. So Ars Magna is the story drop, but I believe it's not supposed to be here. I want to say it's the other book that's actually supposed to be here. I should probably go mention that to Rakes real quick. Yeah, but, you know, let me check the patch notes real quick, because I believe in the patch notes it was the other one that was supposed to be a story drop. Moddins, One Vision 0.0. Oh yeah, and we got Aircel at this point. So, she's all well and dandy. Let's go ahead and resort her where she needs to be. The other archers. Currently not dead, so that's generally a good thing. Now, I like to keep my archers' uniforms, so... one of them. And you can see here, she doesn't even have the highest attack in the bunch. Actually, Sarah outclasses her at the moment. Skill-wise... trajectory, anatomy... and so, yeah, trajectory is all she's missing. That's fine. Drop a quick save there. Let's see, where is this book? Okay, added to Deneb's shop. Sorry, I scrolled a little bit too far here, as far as which updates are here. Yeah, Medicine 1 was renamed to Ars Magna. It contains Endgame and can be bought from Deneb and Coda 2. Medicine 2 was changed to Herbalism. It's still a story battle drop. So... well, yeah, those are in the wrong order. Oh well, that happens. You know, new version comes out. That's why we do these things, to test them. So, at any rate, I will probably cut this one off a little early then. Actually, no, I think what I'll do... go do Bordeaux real quick, because that's a pretty quick one. Let's probably replace Crushinator with Aerosol. No, she's already in it. It's Spencer in here. It's a relatively easy fight anyway. There we go. Notified Mr. Rakes. Alright. Go against this ninja guy. This is kind of the point at which different classes finally start appearing. Wait a sec, did I... what the hell route am I even on? I think this is Chaos, so... don't have to worry about trying to save Ravenous. Switch for the last like 4 or 5 runs I've done of this, like I had the same thought every time, like I'm gonna go make sure to save Ravenous this time, and then completely forget as soon as that comes up. Every single time. Alright. Yeah. This whole piling mechanic, speaking of games with interesting stressfulness or not stressfulness, there's another kind of alien invasion series just called UFO. And this kind of piling thing is like 90% of that game. It's interesting because it takes the whole, the same mechanics of like, you know, XCOM or Xeno or any of those, but they change it to a real-time strategy thing. And basically what it devolves into is just lumping all your dudes in this little dot, and you just go around like death dotting everything. And it's actually surprisingly good. The voice acting's terrible. That's one thing I do remember very, very distinctly about that series, is I ended up buying the entire thing for like $5. Like, it's really well done, the music is really good, you end up seeing a lot of cool little innovations that they did, but, yeah. No, the voice acting, you could tell they just used people from the studio. Like, okay, get the janitor in here. Gotta get this guy grunting. And so it was, and so it happened, and yeah. Very good series, though. Double block. Everyone's just blocking. It's a block party. So point being, yeah. Stressfulness in strategy games is kind of one of those things I never hear that actually brought up. Feels like it should come up more often than it does. It's kind of a big thing, I think. Like this one, okay, so comparing this one and the original in terms of stressfulness, right? This one was, even, you know, original form, this form, whatever. In general, it's just so much more pleasant to play, and a lot of people attribute it to like, oh, got better graphics and stuff like that, and it's like, no, it's not the graphics, just the presentation in general makes it a lot easier to get into. And I don't mean the presentation just in terms of the visuals and all that, but I mean how fast everything moves, how little time is lost on every action, how, you know, even when you lose, you know, you're not, like, lose units or whatever else and backing off, you kind of have that whole, okay, it's serious time moment, and then you end up pulling all kinds of crazy tricks to be able to still win. Like, all that stuff makes it a lot less stressful, I feel. Whereas, is it fair to compare it to that one? I don't know. Long story short, it's just, like, okay, let's compare this and FFT, right? Or no, this and the original, that's what I was trying to compare here. So, comparing with the original, it took a very long time to do anything. You ended up losing units before you could even do anything, and they were just lost permanently. And you ended up running into situations where there were clearly overpowered units, and there was very little you could do to skew that balance. Like, as far as archers were overpowered in vanilla, they were even worse in the original, and there was absolutely no reason for it either. Like, I know they like archers and everything, but Christ, it was stupid. Like, to the point where they made everything very difficult, but they made so much of it rely entirely on levels. But if you used archers, you basically could get completely past that. Like, they were the only ones that seemed to be effective regardless of level for whatever reason. And it got to the point where literally I was just between fights, I was going and replenishing archers at this one random map. I forget what it's called. It's the one right above... I'm having a hard time remembering stuff today. Right above Almorica, that map. I don't know why I can't remember it at the moment. But that is the one right there. And yeah, there was no reason to use anything else, like especially Terror Knights and things like that. They were worthless. Like, absolutely worthless. Not even oh, you gotta use them a particular way. No, they straight up worthless. They couldn't win in a fight against anything. That was really something. Alright, this off. I really like having these guys with hammers. But yeah, point being, the weird imbalance and the fact that it took so long to take any actions, the fact that while doing auto-grinding, your units would end up using up your items and stuff like that, it added a lot of frustrations to it, to the point where, you know, the original was much harder to enjoy, I feel. Not so much because of the visual presentation, but because of the presentation of everything else. And yeah, even with the imbalances, they were smooth enough in the rest of the implementation in the remake that I just feel like this one was a lot less stressful. Oh, there's that. Just random thoughts on that of the day. Another reason why, going back to the earlier comparison thing, like, let's say original XCOM feels so much more stressful than something like the remakes later. You know, despite the fact that you were essentially more than likely losing as many units at the same time. Possibly even worse in some cases. Depending on how people did things, actually. Oh. The way it has messages? Weird. Lots of emails all of a sudden. Don't you just love when your phone just decides not to answer whatsoever for hours and then suddenly all of your missing messages come in? Well, anyway, so that's enough rambling for now. And yeah, see you in a few days. Bye.